the beginning, stock cars outran the police to deliver the hooch to our ancestors. So sweet. Are you ready for a trip down victory lane, where Richard Petty's winnings were insane and Dale Earnhardt put everyone to shame? Canadian Junior Handley is in the Hall of Fame. Live from Haldeman County, it's time for the Driver in Deep podcast. Are you ready?
Hey everyone, and thanks again for joining us for the Driver in Deep podcast. This is episode 35. My name is Mark McSporin, and I'm here with my co-host Alex Nagy. And hopefully everyone is having a great week so far.
Absolutely. So Mark, we mentioned on the last episode that the Clash for the NASCAR Cup Series was taking place in LA on the weekend at the Coliseum there, which that place has an incredible history. So tell me, what did you think of it?
Wow. I think you have to give it up to NASCAR. The LA Coliseum looked amazing. You know, and as we mentioned last week, 70% of the tickets sold were to people who had never purchased a ticket for NASCAR previously. So before the race even started, NASCAR won. However, this track and its uniqueness, combined with the new NASCAR race cars that we talked about last week, I still thought, Alex, maybe there's a potential they can mess it up if the track didn't race well or the competitors turned it into a little bit of a joke. But
that's true.
Yeah, and that didn't happen. Clearly the racers were there to win, and they didn't give an inch, at least in my perspective. And, I want to hear what you have to say. But even at times they were going 3 wide, and just looking at that track, I didn't know how that could even be possible. There was one point during qualifying that it did look a little bit like racing at Niagara Speedway with all the spinouts happening.
Is that where you got your first win?
Yeah, that is, as a matter of fact. But, we can talk about that later. But all kidding aside, it was a huge hit for NASCAR. I hope they keep thinking along these lines, because it feels to me like motorsports is having a bit of a renaissance right now. And this is NASCAR's chance to keep the momentum moving in that direction.
I agree. In my opinion, it was a home run. It was an event, a spectacle, if you will. Non-points exhibition race. But like I told you last week, a race is a race, man. I don't care. When you're a racer, you put your helmet on, you're racing. And that's what those guys did. NASCAR and everyone involved were so limited on what they could do with that track because of space, the shape of the stadium, etc. So for a pretty much flat quarter-mile track in new, unproven cars, I thought the racing was very good.
Yeah, and I even heard on his YouTube channel, our friend Herman the German, Kenny Wallace, he said that he thought that the optics and the race for this event were great. And I think from what I've seen so far, the overall sentiment from longtime fans and potential new fans was great. So my question to you, Alex, I'm going to put you on the spot here. If you were NASCAR, what would you do to follow this up?
Well, I think they're already doing it. And I think this is part of this, this wasn't a one-off, a one-off, or they thought about it last week or in December when they started to build it. They've been working hard with the people that are from Speedway Motorsports Incorporated to bring the Nashville Fairgrounds back, which it seems to be on its way. Great half-mile speedway. And also the same company, SMI, have approved a budget to rebuild North Wilkesboro Speedway, another half-mile historic short track. So, this wasn't a one-time see what happens. There's definitely been a bit of a lean towards shorter tracks, more action, shorter races. And I think that this is just kind of starts the whole ball rolling.
Yeah, I really hope so, because I thought it was great this weekend. Anyway, we haven't had much disc golf chatter lately, and and I'm sure that some of our listeners at least are happy about that, but too bad. There's just way too much snow though, Alex, to play right now, and it doesn't really make for a particularly fun round when you're losing $40 discs in the middle of the fairway.
Yeah, I don't care if they're $4 discs, searching for them. You know, it's easy when you play real, normal golf, ball golf. You lose a ball, you just walk away, drop another one, $2, whatever. So,
Yeah.
And listen, you don't play that in the snow. So with disc golf, you have that opportunity, but yeah, just too much snow right now. But we'll get back out. You're right. The banter between us has been at an all-time low, but one thing that's never changed, the Bills are still knocked out of the playoffs. And although the NHL All-Star week just ended, there hasn't been a lot of games, of course, but still nobody cares if the Sabres are playing. So tell me who you got for the Super Bowl. Speaking of football.
It's pretty good that you'd got two. You said that our banter is at an all-time low, but you got two digs in at two of my teams in the same paragraph.
Just summarizing.
Oh, summarizing. Okay. Well, listen, my response to that is that the Bills, as you know.
Here we go.
We're only one play away from probably winning the Super Bowl this year. But luckily for me, Alex,
they were one play away from losing to Cincinnati.
No, they were one play away. You got to let me talk now. It's my turn.
Yeah, go ahead.
But luckily for me, you're going to have to hear about the Bills for many more years to come because they're awesome. I'm just sitting here wondering how many diamonds Josh Allen is going to have in total in his Super Bowl ring collection by the time he retires, probably as a legend in Buffalo. I guess we'll have to wait and see for that. But you also mentioned the NHL All-Star Week. There's definitely an opportunity for the NHL to work on their brand with this. It felt to me like they were just getting it out of the way so that they can try to get back and finish the regular season, which it seems like there's not very much interest in right now, so that we can get to some playoff hockey. And other than Rasmus Dahlin's nifty toe drag and tucking the puck in the 5-hole during the All-Star game, there really wasn't much else to be excited about. As far as the Super Bowl is concerned, Alex, I can't see how the Rams are going to lose. I think it's going to be a blowout. How about you?
Well, you said the same thing about the Bills, but I do think the Rams will win. And speaking of your boy, Josh Allen, I told you, the Bills, if they can get a team now, right now they got a quarterback. And you're right. Hopefully he doesn't go down as a Buffalo legend like Jim Kelly, who I love, because Jim Kelly hasn't won nothing either. And if that toe drag by Dahlin at the All-Star game is what you're hanging your hat on, kind of, again, summarizes your season.
Well, listen.
What?
Hang on. Jim Kelly did not lose anything for Buffalo. He never kicked the football wide right. That wasn't his fault. He's a legend. He deserves to be a legend. So what? If he didn't happen to win the big game as part of the Bills, he's still a winner as far as I'm concerned. And everything that he's done for that city, you have to give it to him. You just do. So
I told you he's a legend, a losing legend.
Yeah.
Anyways, how about we get to the stuff that matters, especially to our guests, with our guest, who, by the way, is actually kind of odd for us because it's the first time that we've had somebody on that neither of us have ever met before, which I must say it's been a bit different.
Yeah, you're right. With us today is Dan O'Toole, who many of you know from TSN with the Jay and Dan show, or our friends from the U.S. might remember Jay and Dan on Fox Sports 1 while they were in L.A. for a few years. Dan himself, though, has been a staple of sports broadcasting and been in the living room of Canadians since 2003. To put that in perspective, because that's such a long time ago, Dan was in his first year at TSN the last time the Leafs won a playoff round in 2004.
Yeah, no, you're right. Good perspective.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's about the last time the Sabres were ever in the playoffs. You're right. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah.
Dan, what?
Well, I'm glad that somebody should be fact checking you right now, but regardless.
Yeah, whatever. Or yourself, buddy. No, I think it has been that long for the Leafs, but same for the Sabres. Getting back to our guest, Dan has some mutual friends, of course. And when I saw that he launched a new podcast recently, about a month ago, I thought, man, it'd be cool to have him on. He's done so much in broadcasting over his 25-ish year career. And he's been all over the place, and he's a little bit of a race fan also. So I'm interested to see what he's got to say.
Yeah. Do you think he has more knowledge of motorsports than I do?
Buddy, my cat has more knowledge about motorsports than you. Anyways, let's welcome Dan to the show.
You can find Dan on Twitter and Instagram at DanGeoTool, and you can find Dan's new podcast, Boomsies, on YouTube and all your favorite podcasting platforms. You may know Dan from the Jay and Dan Show, formerly on TSN or Fox Sports 1, and he currently hosts his brand new podcast, Boomsies. Welcome to Driver in Deep, Dan.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. I've heard from some people, though, make sure if you're using voice to search on your TV that you speak clearly, because boobies has come up. Boobies, not boomsies. It's boomsies. It's boomsies. So make sure you enunciate very clearly.
I did that on YouTube. Worked out all right. Anyways, hi, Dan. And like Mark said, welcome. You know, I mentioned in our intro prior to you coming on that you were our first guest that neither me or Mark have met. So it's a bit different for us. But in your case, it's a little different because we've seen you on TV for so long. It seems like we know a little bit about you anyway. So, you know, also, as you know, this is primarily a motorsports podcast, and we, you know, get off track once in a while, of course. But, and you know, you're a little bit of a race fan also.
Yeah.
You've been able to attend some really cool NASCAR events. Tell us a bit about your race experience so far.
Oh, I've got to go to, so I've been to Talladega, Pocono, Daytona, Homestead, and Bristol. So I've knocked out some pretty big ones.
Yeah.
In my time, because I used to work with NASCAR on TSN, and out of all those, there is no comparison for what one's my favorite. Sure. Talladega.
Yeah.
Wow.
Talladega. It's just, there's something about it. The super speedway in which you just see them the first few laps and then they start humming. And then you get a break in the action. You can actually hear the person next to you. You can have a chat and you go, oh, here they come. There's just something about a super speedway that I absolutely love. So Talladega is number one on my list, followed by Daytona.
Did you happen to get into the infield at Talladega?
Of course.
That's why you
where,
like it so much.
Yeah, what is it? Millionaire's Alley?
Yeah, I think it's called something like that. What is it?
Yeah, it is a wild show. They used to have the Halloween race there. So it was the biggest party probably of the year on NASCAR. So Talladega, if you can make it to the infield, definitely worth your while.
So did you happen to catch any of the clash from the LA Coliseum last night?
No, I just saw highlights, and from all indicators, from the viewers, from the drivers, they can't believe they pulled it off.
Yeah.
Now, what were your guys' thoughts? Because it looked fantastic. And the fact that they actually were able to build a racetrack in the Coliseum is mind-boggling.
Yeah, I'll go first and then I'll give it to Mark. But we talked about it last week on our podcast because they're getting set to go. And we just reviewed it prior to you coming on today. And for me, you know, and I'll let Mark speak to it, but awesome. I mean, you have to, you know, in this business, you have to go outside the box nowadays. It's about entertainment. It's about an event. Before you used to have a race. Now you have an event and there happens to be a race there. So I applaud them. They went totally offside and did something totally different. And it was awesome.
Yeah. And, you know, I'll expand on that a little bit. As far as this event's concerned, 70% of all the tickets they sold to this event were to people who had never bought a ticket to a NASCAR event before. So I said in the intro that as far as I'm concerned, NASCAR already won when that happened, but they could have still screwed it up. And looking at this new style racetrack that they had, you know, we weren't quite sure with the new cars that they're using this year, are they going to be willing to bang those up and so on. But yeah, they put on a great event. There was a little bit of demolition derby, I think, in the preliminary races, but I thought it was awesome. I thought they did a great job. I thought that they have to be thrilled with the people that were watching this event, and whether you're a longtime fan of the sport or somebody new to the sport, I think that the sentiment was very similar. People thought it was a great time. So congratulations.
Well, you guys mentioned the biggest thing that NASCAR has to do, and that is get people to races, because I remember being at Daytona with a group of contest winners and executives. So one executive was there from Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. He had never been to a NASCAR race. So we go to the events on like the lead up on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, then it gets to race day. We're driving there on a bus all together on race day. And he turns to me and says, "This is the greatest sporting event I've ever been to." And I said, we haven't even got to the race yet. He goes, "I know, just the lead up and the events surrounding it." So getting people to a race is something that is difficult, but once you've got them, you've got fans for life. So you mentioned the 70% of fans at the Coliseum were brand new race fans. Now you've got them hook, line, and sinker, but it's again, getting them to events. So say you run Pocono Raceway. Pocono's always been there. There's nothing new to it. So getting new fans there, like to existing tracks, that's a difficult thing.
Yeah. And it's, Dan, it's not just NASCAR, right? It holds true in the side of the business that I'm on for short tracks, local racetracks.
Yes.
Because our fan has grown old and we haven't replenished that very well. So, catering to kids and getting them involved and fresh faces is so key. You hit it right in the head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Getting them, making it an event, one where you can just show up and you're like, oh, this was a fun night out or a fun afternoon with the family. So yeah, it's getting those people to try it out, to try something new.
And speaking of local tracks, you have a fun little short track right in your own backyard or pretty close to it in Peterborough Speedway. Have you spent any time there at all?
Yes. I don't know if you guys remember, but they always used to have the series finale there. And I think it was 4 years in a row. It rained every single time. So the
Autumn Colors Classic.
That's right. So it was always jinxed. I saw more harness racing there than anything. But then just down the road from it, we've got Canadian Tire Motorsports Park.
Yeah. It's close
and
to
that is an amazing venue. And whenever I see Ron Fellows there, I always ask him if I can cut the grass. He says, "But that's my job. I need something to do."
Well, you were making mention of the horse track at Kawartha Speedway, but just not far from there is Peterborough Speedway, which is actually different because Kawartha is actually. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm confusing it. So Kawartha
there's two,
is
actually, yeah.
So not Kawartha Downs, the other one.
Yeah.
Okay, so that one was right by my buddies. And here's the thing about getting new people through the gate. We could hear it from his house when we were teenagers, but we never ventured over to give it a look. So yeah, I'm guilty of something that I said others need to be convinced to, and I was not convinced, even though I could hear it. I'm like, that sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Well, for our listeners, we wanted to take you back a little bit to the beginning of your career, just so that they can learn a little bit more about you. And you've been in the business, I think, around 25 years, and you started with doing play-by-play for the Ottawa 67s at one point in time. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey, Dan, leading up to your first stint at TSN?
Yeah, I was in college at Algonquin, started doing play-by-play there with the college. And then my first ever broadcasting job while still in school was an airborne traffic reporter out in Vancouver. So they hired a guy from Ontario to report on traffic in Vancouver. Didn't make a lot of sense.
Really?
But I think it's because the price they got me at. I believe I made $13,000 a year. So I don't know how I survived. But I did it and then went from there up to Fort McMurray, Alberta, got back into play-by-play for the Fort McMurray Oil Barons, spent 3 years there. And then while I was in Fort McMurray, got into TV, sent a demo tape to a station in Vancouver. They said, "Okay, we'll hire you a year from now." The guy called me a year to the day. "Did you get some more experience?" I said, "Yep." He said, "You're hired." It was a different time back then. To Vancouver, was there for 9 months when TSN called. And so I made the move from Vancouver to Toronto in 2002. So yeah, I've been able to see this great country, living in Vancouver twice, Fort McMurray once, and then settling just outside from where I grew up in Peterborough. Going to TSN at Toronto.
Did you ever feel that you were going to become a play-by-play guy?
I always wanted to, but then I got to have so much fun doing highlights with Jay that I didn't really miss it, because with play-by-play, you're always on the road. You're away from your family. So I would love to do it again at some point because play-by-play is a blast. I grew up idolizing Bob Cole, putting the games on mute at home and trying my own play-by-play. So, yeah, I'm kind of glad that I ventured away from it.
So I've always wondered, man, how did you and Jay meet?
At work. When, yeah, we got paired together in 2004. There was a gentleman by the name of Blake Price working on the show with Darren Detition. He had to move back to Vancouver for some family commitments. So Jennifer Hedger, who was paired with Jay, got moved onto the show with Dutchie. And I got moved off weekends with Jay. So Jay always says, yeah, I was paired with Jennifer Hedger. And then I got you. You're welcome. So well, if Blake Price had never moved to Vancouver, Jay and I probably never would have been paired together. So I always thank Blake when I see him. It all worked out.
Yeah. You know, you got to do what, you know, most young Canadian boys dreamed about when they're kids. I mean, for me, I grew up in St. Catharines, Ontario, and all we did was play road hockey. And my play-by-play guy was and always will be Rick Jenneret. And listening to some of his calls over the years is what really, I think, not just turned me into a Sabres fan or a hockey fan, but into a sports fan. You know, the passion he's had for the years, and we all know some of the amazing calls that he's made over the years. That's really what cemented with me. So hearing you and the story of how you started by doing play-by-play, like, that's a dream come true for a lot of us. So, you know, that's great.
Jenneret's, I'm glad you got to grow up on that. He is a legend, man. He's just so entertaining. And people that I always had a problem before Bob Cole retired, people having a problem with Bob Cole. Oh, he doesn't know the teams. It's not about him nailing the names. It's his cadence of the call, how he can predict when to bring the excitement level up. It's just like hearing his voice. That's just hockey, just like Jenneret. Some people might bash him for being a homer. No, that's him. That's how people grow to love the game, by having a voice in their head when they think of the sport.
Yeah, I agree, because I remember when Bob Cole was getting bashed a little bit for that. And I heard Jenneret just a little while ago, and I thought to myself, you know, he's slowing down. But again, it doesn't even matter. He gets a pass. He can say whatever he wants, man.
Yeah,
and however he wants it, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, you and Jay had a great run for around 10 years initially, and then you guys moved south and took your show to Fox Sports. That must have been a huge decision for you guys to move to a different country. At that time, were you looking for the next step in your career, or did somebody else find you guys?
Fox came to us when they were ready to launch a new sports network, Fox Sports 1, after reading an article that was written in, I believe it was the Wall Street Journal. Their business reporter in Toronto wrote an article about why can't American Sports Center be like Canadian Sports Center. And they saw that article and then approached us. And then, you know, the sound of a dump truck backing up, beep, beep. Imagine one of those filled with money.
Yeah.
So that's why we made the move. And you mentioned Fox in LA. I forgot to mention, I've also been to Auto Club Speedway there. So it's out in the middle of nowhere. So that was another track I got to see. But 4 years in LA. We were there for the launch of a network. A lot of stumbling blocks along the way, namely one of them being no one could find the channel. Because when you're on cable TV in the States and your channel, I believe our channel was like 16,005. Like, you aren't going to stumble upon us. So, but they treated us amazing, and I don't regret a second of our time at Fox in LA. And they're also rights holders for half the NASCAR season. So we had access to all the drivers that we wanted to have on our show and any race we wanted to go to. So they were just a great company to work for.
That's good. Although, you know, when you guys left Canada and went to Fox, and as a viewer of your show, it left a big void here for a lot of people in Canada. But for me, I was a bit lucky. During that time, I was working for NASCAR, and I traveled to the U.S. a bunch for meetings. So I got to catch up with you guys on late night TV.
Oh, so you were our viewer.
Yeah.
Our one.
Yeah. Well, every once in a while. But it was great because, you know, it just brought back a bunch of memories when I got to see you two guys. It was like I hadn't missed a beat. You guys hadn't missed a beat even though
Yeah,
it was a different location. It was
I actually
it was good to
have,
catch up.
we made it because our guest this week on my podcast is a guy we used to work with, Ephraim Salam. So I had to bring this out because of our old picture. Our
Oh, nice.
Fox Sports 1, we were on the cover of the New York Post.
Oh,
On the
wow.
back cover. So yeah, we were reliving old times when there's abundance of cash when you work for a massive TV network like Fox. So it's a big difference.
Oh, that part is great, I'm sure.
Yes.
Even though it was the channel, I just was surprised the show never flew. I mean, you make fun of it a little bit, make light of it, I guess, on your podcast, Boomsies. And I mean, with you and Jay and the star power you guys had, I was just surprised, I guess, that people never got to it.
I was not surprised at all because when they first pitched it to me, I'm like, that is not going to work. But this is an opportunity we can't turn down. It was like they tried to put about 7 different shows together, and there was literally like 12 producers working on that show, and each of them would produce like a 10-minute segment. So the show didn't even work together because the producers were each trying to do their own thing. So it was just a hodgepodge of stuff. And then once that show was abandoned, they put Jay and I literally in a closet to do a show because they're like, well, we're still paying these guys. They're still under contract. We better use them. And even when it was just the two of us, we really weren't even doing our own show because we had writers writing what we were saying. And I'm like, I was not happy. I loved working there. I just wasn't happy with the product. There's not one single show that I would put on a demo reel if I was putting one together until we did shows. We convinced Fox to send us to the Russian Olympics in Sochi. So we were on our own. And those are the only things that I would put on a highlight reel of our time at Fox, because we did stupid pieces about just out on the street in Russia. And we were actually finally able to be ourselves. So we were never able to get our footing down in the States. And then when we returned to Canada in 2017, and I pointed to this in my previous podcast, our shows from 2017 up until when I was let go in 2021, those are my favorite shows we've ever done.
Yeah.
Like we were in a groove. We did stuff that made each other cry. We laughed so much because that was Jay's and I's biggest goal each night, was to make each other laugh. And we achieved that every single night. So the last 4 years of our show, which was kind of a kick in the butt, when you're doing the show that you've always wanted to do and you're in your groove, and then they're like, yeah, we don't need you anymore. You're like, but are you guys watching the show we're doing right now? So anyway, those are my thoughts on, the move from Fox, the time at Fox up to when I was let go.
Yeah, that's definitely unfortunate at the time, but you found a home back at TSN fairly quickly. Was that surprising to you, or were they looking to bring you back as soon as you finished up down there?
Yeah, they knew our contract was coming up. They didn't know if it would be renewed, so the TSN executives flew down, gave us a big pitch, and it felt great to be wanted. So, yeah, we couldn't wait to return to Canada, because as much as we loved living by the beach in California, there's nothing like returning home, because friends and family, as opposed to a 5-hour plane ride away, are now a 20-minute drive away, and nothing can replace that. And just living in a country with free health care and stuff like that, stuff we take for granted. Even I came back and I now enjoy the winters. Before I was like, oh man, the cold. Now I embrace winter, because people always asked when I lived in LA, do you miss the seasons? And I'm like, no, it's great. And now I'm going to sound like someone who needs their head examined, but when it's like 75 or 80 and sunny every day kind of blends into each other. Mm-hmm. So like right now, we've got a 2-degree day on February 7th, and it's sunny outside, and you're like, man, what a gorgeous day. You don't take days like this for granted here. So it makes you appreciate things a lot more when you live in this country and it's just not all the same beautiful weather and palm trees every single day, which sounds weird to say, but it's the truth.
I don't. Go ahead, Alex.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, me and my family moved to Nashville for 3 years, chasing a dream too. And a little bit more seasonal there than it is in LA. So we still had fall. We'd get the odd snowstorm. So it wasn't, it was still kind of nice, but I miss that weather because we still had seasons per se. But it was still warmer than home.
Yes. Yeah. And Nashville, you can't beat that, but living in Nashville as opposed to visiting Nashville, two very different things. Just like living in Vegas and visiting Vegas are two different things. Because you go to Broadway, and as a visitor, you go every night. But if you live there, if you went every night, you'd die.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say, just to summarize, you come back, when you did come back to TSN, these guys had another great run. And like you say, it didn't make any sense that it's over. But I guess maybe a bit of the sign of the times with Tim and Sid getting broken up too. And obviously it seems to be the way that, they were going to cut costs.
Which makes no sense when your company makes $1 billion, like over $1 billion.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I don't try to make sense of it anymore. So when they let me go, instead of just sitting and building anger, I just changed my mindset. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to turn this into a positive. So I started a little thing on my Instagram in which it was called Danitized. I got Canadian businesses to send me their products, businesses that were having a tough time because of the pandemic. So I just do a little advertisement for them on my Instagram, and it helped a lot of them out, and it just put good karma out in the world. So yeah, I could have laid in the gutter, but instead I said, nah, let's turn this into a positive. And actually the past year has been unreal as far as my personal growth, my time with my family. And it's just, who knew getting fired at the age of 46 could be turned into a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. It's all in how you look at it. No question about that. And I know that Alex, you and I have both listened to episodes of Boomsies so far, and I think it's great. It's and just reading and your last interview, I think, or maybe not your last one, but I think it was on Daily Hive, and something that they quoted you on really resonated with me. And if you don't mind, I'm going to say it. It's you mentioned that you can have a sports conversation any day of the week. But do you really need to be that invested in it? It's for entertainment. And I feel like that sometimes myself, because you go so far down this rabbit hole with fantasy sports and pools and statistics and things, and everyone's trying to prove their point. But, really at the end of the day, for me anyway, I feel better about sports when I'm not that involved in it. How does that feel that way for you now that you're
100%?
Yeah.
And I think in that same interview, I pointed out how when you're doing sports highlights every single night for 24 years, every night kind of starts to blur into the next, and you aren't hoping for an overtime game when you're on at midnight. You're hoping that game's over so you don't have to stay there later. Yeah. So it doesn't get monotonous, but it kind of just blends the next night to the next night. So when I was removed from that, and then the Montreal Canadiens went on their Stanley Cup run last year, I became a fan again because I cheered for the Habs when they had Patrick Waugh. I was jumping up and down. I'm like saying to my buddy, I can't remember the last time that I got into sports this much. So when you're removed from something, you rediscover the love. And that's what I was able to do in the past year. Yeah, and as far as talking about sports, of course, when I have conversations with people, I don't just go in there and jump right into talking about sports. You just start conversations with no agenda. And that's kind of how I approach my podcast. I just go in and talk about stuff as sports come up, which it always does, and it comes up.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure while you were working there, you'd get asked about sports and you couldn't answer because you didn't have a script.
Exactly.
Now you have to think about it again.
or I tell them that's what Google's for.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as we mentioned, Dan, you've got your new podcast called Boomsies. which I think is fantastic. And I'm sure will give you a big boost here being on Driver and Deep.
That's right.
Yeah.
We need to get that women demo up because right now we only have 100% men listening. So
We have 4 women. So
okay, perfect. That's all I need.
Yeah.
That's all I need.
Yeah.
And 2 of them are our wives.
Okay. So let's talk about Boomsies for a minute here. You know, you kind of tossed it out there that Boomsies can be anything that you want it to be. So I thought about it. I thought, Boomsies to me now, like I have a teenager. The way they talk is so different than the way we used to talk. There's a shortcut or short form for everything. Dope, Finsta, which is like a fake Instagram account. And I looked that up. So I didn't even know that before today. I'm not gonna lie about it. But Boomsies to me reminds me, I don't know, maybe a decade ago when there was a popular saying, boom goes the dynamite.
Ah, yeah, kind
You guys
of.
remember? So, and to me, it kind of means the same thing. It's like when something happens, instead of saying boom goes the dynamite, that's a mouthful. Now we can just say Boomsies. So
That's
for
right.
me, I'm glad that you shortened it to Boomsies. And, and hopefully the more we say it, the more people are going to get to know it.
And I can't even take credit. A producer that we had at Fox in LA, he would say it in our ears. He'd go Boomsies when there was a big play. So I told him, I'm going to use that for my podcast. He said, perfect, do it. So yeah, if you win a bet, Boomsies. If you score a goal, Boomsies. If something good in life happens, that's a Boomsies.
There is one thing though. You did a segment, about food courts. What's in your food court?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I missed it or not.
Me and Mark had to argue about this too.
Okay. What's in your
You
guys'
did.
food courts?
There's nothing there with chicken wings.
Yeah. Cause I've never had chicken wings in a food court. I had
That's
chicken
what I
wings
told him.
last night.
That's what I told him.
But why can't you have chicken wings in a food court? Don't you think?
Okay.
that-
At the same time, I was thinking this too, because I love pork chops. I'm like, why is there never fast food pork chops?
Well, you were making your own food court, man. You could have had whatever you wanted.
yeah.
But I wanted to go with existing places because I could go with little mom and pop restaurants, but no one would know them. So yeah, I had to throw in like the chains like A&W or whatever the heck I threw into my food court. But yeah, I've never had food court chicken wings. So that
An
would never be
opportunity.
on my radar.
Yeah.
It's just too messy when you're in a food court because you need like a hose after you eat chicken wings.
I do anyway.
That's
And,
true.
and a washing machine.
Yes, exactly.
Well, that's good.
Anyways,
Well,
Dan-
we have another segment here. Are we ready for rapid fire, Alex?
Oh yeah, I love rapid fire.
Okay. So you know what rapid fire is? Where, answer the questions as quick as possible.
Yes,
And Alex, I think you're going to start us off. And then we're going to get you out of here.
I'm ready.
All right, Dan. Best thing about living in LA.
The weather.
Favorite sport?
Baseball.
You'll know I'm listening to your podcast when I ask you this. Golden Corral.
Garbage.
My dad loved that place and when he was in Florida. Okay. Well, chicken wings or pizza?
Chicken wings all day. Pizza is the most overrated food on earth. I have pizza like once a year.
And also from your podcast, do you have a life tip for today for our listeners?
Yes, I'll steal it from my podcast. When you get strawberries from the grocery store, rinse them off, cut them up, and then put them in a Tupperware container with paper towel in the bottom, and then put the lid on. Those things will keep fresh for like a week and a half, as opposed to if you just keep them in the container, they're only good for a couple days. That's
There you
going to change your life.
All right. You've interviewed many athletes over your time in broadcasting. Is there a favorite interview or athlete that you can point to?
Norm Macdonald, even though he's not an athlete, but he appeared on our show in LA.
Funny guy. Yeah. Wish I met him.
Legend.
Yeah, he is. Jay Onright.
Great guy. Very tall. Everyone thinks I'm really short. I'm like an average size human. I'm like 5'9", but he's 6'5". So if anyone stands next to him, you look short.
You know what? I love it. Still shows up even with you not on the set when he sits in that chair and his knees are up around his chin. I laugh my ass off.
I know. He's extremely tall.
Family.
The best. That's what life's all about. family.
Any regrets?
Regrets. Should have saved more money from my time working in the United States.
Okay, now the big one, and people are going to be listening very close to your answer here.
Okay.
Who's going to win the Super Bowl?
Bengals.
Ooh.
Even though I never pick winners because, as I mentioned on my podcast, I only take overs. I am taking the over in that game. So the total I'm looking at right now is 48.5.
Yeah.
I am taking the over. So that's my one bet. I never pick winners because I don't like rooting for one team. If you take the over, you're rooting for both teams.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good bet.
Good
I like
advice.
that bet.
Yeah.
And it's more fun than taking the under. There's nothing to cheer for. Like, don't score that touchdown.
If you take the under, you don't like life and you probably don't like puppies.
Oh, that's great. Well, listen, once again, you can find Dan on Instagram and Twitter at Dan G. O'Toole and on YouTube and your favorite podcast player by searching for Boomsies.
Thanks again, Dan, for being our guest. We wish you all the success with Boomsies and everything else that you do moving forward.
Appreciate it, guys.
Well, we're wide open sideways.
All right, you're clear.